So speaking of, can we settle something? This is for our audience.
Uh-oh.
Everybody listening, we're about to solve a problem for the world. Is it GIF or GIF?
I am team GIF for sure.
So
GIF is peanut butter.
That's just what I call it. Like, I don't know what to call it.
That is real because people are firmly on team one or the other.
Yeah.
And that's a real thing.
Well, I just like to say the opposite of what somebody else says, just to see their response. Because I don't really care one way or the other.
Okay, I like that. I'll just start doing it. I'm going to send a Jiffy.
No. It's never Jiffy. It's never.
It is from now on. It just became that.
Well, welcome to Bonus Features, our podcast where we dive into the crazy and unexpected details that we didn't have time to get into on Sunday. We, at Lifepoint Church, we're doing a sermon series. We're actually in season 4 called Binge the Bible. We're going through all the books of the Bible. We've been renewed for season 4, so check us out, lifepointnow.com. We believe that when you get into God's Word gets into you. So we're going to dive into that today. I am your host. I am Caroline. I'm joined today by Pastor Jason, our resident genius.
Hello, and wonderful job, Caroline. Wonderful
Thank
job
you so much. He got rebranded this year. And also Pastor Kevin, who was you brought the message to us.
I did. It's good to be hanging out with you guys.
Yeah.
Resident genius.
Well,
You started that.
You got upgraded.
I'm just trying to live up to the expectation. I haven't hit it yet.
we used to call him the resident nerd, and that felt rude. And then you upped the nice, and so we're trying to be nicer, I guess. I don't know.
That's what I do. I just come in and
Is it?
I take things and make it better.
Is it?
And I make it better with grace and love and kindness.
And humility.
And humility.
Really.
My humility is my favorite quality about myself. So
Hashtag humble brag. Well, today we're talking about the book of Hosea. And we're not gonna go into all the things, Pastor Kevin, that you talked about yesterday. It was an awesome sermon. If you guys haven't had a chance to listen to it, make sure you go back and listen or watch. But we'll go over a little bit of the themes and then kind of some of the stuff that you didn't get a chance to get into. So
let's do it.
Yeah, let's get started with some of the nitty gritty. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the big rocks of all the message and what it really is about.
What it really is about.
What does it mean to you? Deep in your soul.
So deep in my soul. So Hosea it's about a lot, I think, at the end of the day. And I said something like this in the message. I'm going to see if I can find it because I didn't quite have it memorized. I cheated and read this off the screen when I was speaking. But essentially that it's Hosea is a book that is it's from a heartsick prophet about a heartbroken God. And I think that's really what it's about. And you can see that in God's nature kind of throughout the book is that the nation of Israel has rebelled consistently. I mean, it's kind of been their MO since their inception, sort of. And that's just been their history. Near the end of the book, he actually recites some of their history in a couple of chapters and almost says, this is just what you guys do. And but we see in God this, and I said it yesterday, this righteous anger and this unfailing love. Like we see in him that he wants to just say, you darn kids, like I'm done with you, But at the same time, but at the same time, he can't be that way. And what I see in this book is a real glimpse into the nature of God, like the relational side of him, that he deeply cares about his people. The book of Hosea begins with a snapshot of that through a husband and wife. It ends with that through a snapshot of that from a father to a son. And so we see kind of the bookends of that story being this highly relational God. Like he wants us to be everything to him, and he wants to be everything to us. But in the middle, it's just heartbreak. And even woven into the relational side, it's heartbreak. Yeah. And so it's sort of that, and there's one verse, I'll try to find it and read it, but where God says, my heart churns within me. And you just see that sense of God who's constantly heartbroken for his people. And so Hosea is his mouthpiece to communicate that and to say, here's what it looks like, but then here's some actual charges to level against you guys about what you've done. And the middle of the book, he really rolls through that. And so we started out talking about Hosea and Gomer, which is, it's just fun.
What a duo.
It's fun. And so here's what I've learned. I did not know this. And so I think you guys are more experts on this because all I read is the Bible. But evidently, you guys like read other things, watch movies. I don't know what all that's about. I try to keep my life pure.
Sure.
So there's a book, right, and a movie about the Hosea and Gomer story.
So I was going to say that. So in preparation for this, I didn't do my normal bout of study. I just watched the movie Redeeming Love.
So
Cool.
what I'm bothered about is that I could have, because this is the way I rolled in high school. Like, I didn't read the book. I watched the movie. So I could have studied for this entire sermon with a movie.
Yeah, you done messed up, AA, Ron. That would have been way easier. For sure.
I did give you a hint like a few weeks ago. I was like, there's a movie called Redeeming Love. But I probably didn't put it in the best light for you because you've got to like light a candle. You've got to get like a coffee that's way more flavored creamer than coffee.
Yes. Mocha
and
frappuccino.
put some comfy like sweatpants on and sit back and cuddle on a couch and watch the movie.
So is it like a Hallmark Christian movie? Like, does Hosea go into
it's pretty risque, but it's for a Christian movie. It's pretty risque. And I said I don't think it was like meant to be like just a faith-based film. I'll admit I like a good faith-based film. Like, give me some God's Not Dead. Give me like something like that. I like it. I'll take the cheese with like the substance in the story. Ooh. This was not like your normal faith-based film, but it was a little more like Hallmarky or Pure Flix kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
So Pastor Barry told me that they loved the book. This is where I learned about it from. Is he and Kaylee evidently love this book. He described it as like kind of like a 50 Shades for Christians book. Like, it was like that kind of like a...
Maybe I watched the wrong movie.
I don't know. I mean, this is just the way he described it. Like, he said it was kind of a Christian, like, romance novel.
This feels like a really weird time to point out that this is one of my favorite books.
Well,
because I don't feel that that's true.
It also makes sense why Pastor Barry and Kaylee have like 12 children, right?
Kids.
Because
between that and living in Brunswick County, which
right. So anyway, it might be
that is the trifecta.
It might be the For those of you who are not a part of our church, we have 4 campuses, and one of them in a community called Leland. Everyone there has, on average, 15 kids.
Yes, the land of babies.
And so it might be...
They don't have a movie theater. That's important to note.
But they got a book called Redeeming Love. So anyway.
It really is, like, the book cover is like a lady in this Victorian looking, it's in my office, I should have brought it, gown, and the title is Redeeming Love, which is like, aw, if you're sweet, and I'm like, oh, that's lame if you're me. So it is, but it really is not, it's a fictionalized version of the story, and so it's really not, obviously, you can't have a PG version of the story because it's,
you can't, yeah.
She ain't PG.
Yeah.
But it's actually a very good book. I can't speak to the movie. I think you kind of lost me with Hallmark.
The context is what, 1850 California, like during the gold rush. Is that right?
Oh, I don't know.
I'm just going by. Well,
It's cut to me just saying it was one of my favorite books.
Again, I only read the Bible.
I'm not really a novel guy. I'm actually reading a novel right now just to because I feel like I should read more, but not Redeeming Love. But from the movie, so I will give it one. There was one redeeming factor, if I may.
Wow.
What you did.
Good job there.
The thing that kind of got me was it put Hosea in like a perfect human form.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I viewed the movie. Like, yeah, the movie, it was great. Watching it with Stacy, my wife, it was cool to watch. It's a great story, and it does kind of speak to the level and the character of a man that it would take to walk all of that out and to stay in it the whole time and to lead in and out of it and to be I guess the kind of man that would know how to usher someone into security and comfort and a full embrace, not just physically, but even intimately, but also at the same time being a man's man. And so that was kind of what I walked away with, was Hosea really having all the human storms inside of him while he's walking this call of God out. Because, man, I mean, we mentioned it even before, the level of shame that comes into a guy like a prophet.
Right.
The level of, notoriety that he probably had because he was a prophet. And with his level, I mean, just through his writings, we know that he had a great sense of history, a great sense of knowledge, so he probably wasn't like a peasant prophet. He was probably well adapted to, any environment that he would walk into, he was accepted and kind of listened to. And so I love that. The place where the movie did kind of leave me, I love the story, especially guys waiting in line to see her and to be with her. Because that kind of puts him in perspective too. When you start seeing all these faces and these gross guys and everybody that would have come to the door and what she would have encountered, and he still stays and loves and walks her into a relationship with the Lord. I was like, holy cow, this guy was he was a full-on man. But where the movie does leave me is, and this is where I feel like most people lose track of the book, which is why I enjoyed your message so much, Pastor Kevin, was they kind of leave it at the romance story and that's the truth. And they talk, it's an example of Israel at the time, and that's that God was using it to speak to the nation of Israel, but the love story, and I'm like, the love story is great, and it served its purpose. But the book of Hosea covers so much more.
Yeah.
There's the middle and then the end that kind of connects the suffering and everything.
Right.
So it was, I mean, on a couple different levels I liked it. The human form, but then reality and the full scope of the story it doesn't really capture. But
no, it's interesting. You mentioned how it humanizes. I think that's the word used for Hosea. And Hosea is a book in the Old Testament. It's a minor prophet. To me, it's one of the few that does that.
Yeah.
Like it humanizes everybody in the story. Like and I think it's why so many people, even who are maybe not super familiar with the Bible, are kind of familiar with that story, because it's one that you can kind of like get your mind around. Like you can, while nobody would want to experience that kind of pain and that what he walked through, you can kind of see that. But I think what it does is it uses that to give us a picture of who God is, and the way that he cares for us, and the way that he pursues us, the way that he redeems us. I mean, the most powerful part of the book to me, or at least that first section, is where Hosea goes and redeems or purchases Gomer.
Yeah.
And he goes to an area, it's called the marketplace, and Pastor Jason, you probably know a lot about this, but in that time, it's where commerce happened. It was, for lack of a better term, it was like the mall. And so it's like a mall in the 80s, right? Everything happened there. Everything revolved around the mall.
You got to get at Auntie Anne's and pick up your wife.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And so it was, but it was where everything happened. And it was where slave trade happened. So there's like a comparison of Gomer to a slave that I think the Bible actually says he paid what the going rate was for a slave to own someone. And where most people were paying for like a night with her, were paying for whatever, he paid to like purchase her outright. Yep. And so even that difference of like, this is what she had settled for, was people who were just paying for like a moment. He was paying for her life. And that he rescued, he redeemed her. He did it in a respectful way. Yeah. And to me, just even seeing that side of him, that was, I think you described it like he was a man who'd no doubt been hurt. He had been used, he had been abused. He had felt things, probably self-doubt, everything that you could possibly feel. Like anybody who's walked through, being betrayed in any way, you've probably felt something close to that, if not that. But in the face of that, he followed the word of the Lord, and he rescued her. To me, it is so powerful when you think about that. Yeah. And just it puts such skin on grace to me. Yeah. And so it's strong. Well,
and the imagery is not really lost to me. I get to do a lot of premarital counseling here, and so one of the things we say in premarital counseling is that marriage is supposed to be the vision of Jesus and the church. And when you put that in perspective with Hosea and Gomer and how he assumed, because God speaks to him and he's like, I want you to feel what I feel. Whenever you go back and love her, forgive her and love her like I love Israel, even though they've turned to other gods and other ceremonies and stuff. And so for him to assume all that weight is crazy, because I hear people talking about, well, man, it's just so hard to answer the call of God. I mean, getting up and being at church at 7:30 on Sunday mornings is just so difficult. And I really don't want to belittle, because I know people struggle with different things. But God's calling is not always easy, and a lot of times in the midst of it, we can't see the good. Right. If I was Hosea, I would have had a difficult time seeing the good when my wife has left me and I'm wrestling at night by myself and I've got the thoughts in my head, man, she's with not just another man, she's with other men right now. She's, slinging drinks and making money and going after that whole lifestyle. I'm here with kids, holding it down. I'm a prophet, and I just can't imagine having to wrestle with all the things that he wrestled with, at the same time reconciling the resolve that he had to stay true to God's word.
Right.
And God's calling.
Well, and and we read this verse yesterday, so I don't want to rehash too much of the sermon, but chapter 2, verse 5, she comes to a place in their marriage where they've had one child, and kind of the beginning of the end, so to speak, before she is full on in prostitution. She said, I will go after my lovers. And with everything that Hosea had given her, she starts to highlight the things that I don't know if he didn't give her. I don't know if, I mean, it sounds like these are things that she's saying, hey, I'm going to find fulfillment in these in other people. My food, my water, my wool, my linen, my oil, and my drink. It feels like what she's saying there is, I'm completely leaving you. Because the food and water thing, it's not like they're extras. Like, that's kind of the basics. It sounds like at that point she's saying, I'm completely turning my back on you. I'm not just dabbling in like some affair that I'm trying to hide. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so even that, like, he is completely abandoned. Like, he is at this point raising a child by himself, like you said. And to hear that so clearly articulated, that everything that you give him, there's I heard this years ago, but somebody called it, like, y'all have heard of the 80-20 principle thing? Well, they call it this when it comes to, like, when you're seeking things or searching for fulfillment in things that you don't have, that you're willing to trade the 80 for the 20. Like, we know, if you're in a relationship or you're married or even at a job, like, there's just times where, like, you're not 100% fulfilled at a job, right? Or in your marriage, like, I know Jerry Maguire says otherwise, but, like, your spouse doesn't complete you, right? Like, it's not 100% perfect all the time, but even on the bad days, it's 80.
Yep.
I mean, like, there's days where I let Melissa down, but I'm still, like, I'm at least 80, But what most of the time what we do, and I used this point yesterday in the message, that a lot of times we'll think about what we're missing as being better than what we have, and we'll trade the 80, and we'll trade it in, and what we actually get back is 20. We actually get a negative return. And when you go down a road like this, when it's turning your back on God, turning your back on people who love you, on a marriage relationship, on that commitment, that's really what you're doing. Yeah. And what she doesn't know is what so many people who commit adultery or who cheat or do whatever they do to try to get a leg up, so to speak, they are trading the 80 for the 20. Like, they're walking away from what is stable for them to go after something that is temporary. Yeah. And it just fails every time.
Yeah. Well, you asked a question yesterday during the message, and you said, or you didn't ask a question. You told us to envision ourselves as, we got a little Gomer. If you look in the mirror, raise your hand if you've got a little Gomer. That kind of stuck with me, so I was thinking about it. First of all, because I'm still thinking of Gomer Pyle. So I'm looking in the mirror, I'm seeing Gomer Pyle's face on my body.
Little Gomer makes me think of, like, Baby Groot. So in my mind now, I've got, like, this is what's in my mind. Okay, so go ahead, continue. You're making a spiritual point.
Yeah. So I was looking, and it kind of stuck with me. I was like, so I can remember times in my life when I feel like I was Gomer, like walking away from the Lord, knowing what His best was, indulging in what I thought I wanted more. And you always have those moments where you realize, I've blown it. This is not what I thought it was. How can I just want to get back to where I was. Not mention get to something better. I just want to get back to where I was. And, Gomer has that moment actually towards the end of chapter 2, and it says, she will chase after lovers but not catch them. She will look for them but not find them. Then she will say, I will go back to my husband at first, for then I was better off now. I was better off than I was now. And then it says, she has not acknowledged that I was the one that gave her the grain, the new wine and oil, who lavished on her the silver and gold, which they used for Baal.
Right, which says, of all the things that she says, I'm going to go seek other lovers and find all these things, what she never says are the things that he lavished on her. Yep. And that's the picture of sin, right? Is you go after something chasing fulfillment, but what you're leaving behind is all the blessing that you had, all of the good that you had. And it's interesting because even me, like, I think about Hosea more in the story, like I think about his pain and what he was going through. But we all have Gomer, inside of us, right? So when you chase sin, when you pursue sin, every time you find yourself broken. Yeah. And she is in this story broken. Like, she is searching for something she didn't find. She left everything to find it. And I said this in the message yesterday, but there is in any adulterous relationship, there is the one who's been betrayed, and there's the betrayer. And one of the things that I genuinely did, like, I kind of felt just prompted from the Lord leading up to this message to spend probably more time than we spend on a Binge the Bible message, talking to, like, what you would consider like a felt need, I guess. Yeah. But I feel like I couldn't go through talking about their story without it exposing some of that pain in people who were sitting in the seats or who were watching.
Yeah, that's real.
And so I just kind of felt like I needed to go that way. But with Gomer's story specifically, like even the worst of sinners, there's grace.
Yeah.
There's grace. And it humanized Hosea. It also humanizes the sinner.
Yeah.
Because we all find ourselves there. Not everybody finds themselves, thank goodness, as the one who's been betrayed. And hopefully no one ever has to again.
Yeah.
But at some point, we all find ourselves the sinner. We pursued something, we thought we were going to get it, and it came up short. And that's essentially what God's, the story, the message is to his people, is look, you've pursued all of these other things. You have fallen short. I mean, his anger rose up. But at the end of it all, he's there.
Yeah.
He's there. He's there to rescue. He's there to clean up. He's there to pay a price. He's there to like redeem us out of the things that are not just sins, but also heartbreaks for the sinner, right? They're disappointments. They're things that we kind of pushed all our chips to the middle of the table and we lost it all. Yeah. It's the story of the prodigal son. The father was always waiting at the end of the driveway for him to come home. And so it humanizes the betrayed. To me, it also humanizes the sinner. It humanizes the betrayer. Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful part of a really tough story.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it was a really hard story, but I know I thought you handled it really well, and I know there were some things that you didn't want to say from stage or get into just for lack of time and wanting to cover the whole book. Was there anything coming out of that story that you would have mentioned yesterday if you had time, or anything you were thinking?
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple things. One verse that I left out, there's a couple of verses in chapter 2, verses 8 through 10. Like, I didn't spend a lot of time on the fact that God's responses were anger and love. I did read a passage about love, but there's a passage I just left out. But it's in chapter 2, verses 8 through 10. God is saying out of anger right here. He's saying, she has not acknowledged that I was the one who gave her the grain. You kind of read this, and lavished silver and gold. And then in verse 9, he says, therefore I will take it away. I'll take the grain away when it ripens, and my new wine when it's ready. I will take back my wool and my linen, intended to cover her. And then in verse 10, this is what really struck me. So now I will expose her lewdness before the eyes of her lovers. But then he still says, but no one will take her out of my hands. And so many times we talk about God being a jealous God, especially in the Old Testament, and we have such a negative connotation with that idea. But what he's saying right here is, but at the end of it all, you are not going to take her from me. You just see this jealous resolve from our Heavenly Father that even when sin is doing its best to grab us and steal us, he is like, you will not, you will not, you will not, you will not. Yeah. And I love just that. It's anger, but it's also passion for the one that he loves. Yeah. And so that's a verse I just didn't really have time to get into. Probably the only other thing, we moved through those middle chapters pretty quick. We talked about, really, in a nutshell, they were charges that were leveled against the nation of Israel, idolatry and those kind of things. But the end of the book, I think it's section 3 that talks about a faithful God. So where I didn't really have time to go yesterday was, just like the beginning of the book starts with the relationship between a husband and a wife, the end of the book goes back to a relational illustration. But this time, it is from a father to a son. And just to kind of go through it, I mean, it starts in chapter 11. I think it's at the very beginning of chapter 11, and it says, when Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. So again, he's kind of reciting their history just a little bit. But the more they were called, the more they went away from me. Again, he's kind of just going through that and highlighting the fact that they just weren't with him. But he talks about this son who, no matter how much he chased him around, just wouldn't quite settle. Fast forward into chapter 12, I think it is, and 13, he compares Israel to a teenager. So it's kind of, and it's more of this. It's more of sort of those darn kids. It's just this rebellious teenager. And then chapter 14, you actually see the restored adult. Mm-hmm. So I feel like what Hosea does is he gives us these bookends that are highly relational of this prophecy. In the middle, going like almost saying the beginning and the end, this is what God wants. He wants relationship with you. If you want to think of it like a husband and wife, it is that. If you want to think of it like a father and son, it is that. But in the middle is where we just tend to stray, and where we just tend to mess up. And it really even is reminiscent of the Bible as a whole.
Yeah.
You know, you look at the beginning, we were created in His image. You look at the end, and we are redeemed, a new heaven, a new earth. And then in the middle, we go through what we go through. And so the end part was just one that I really you could almost do an entire sermon just on those last 3 chapters, just on the illustration of our relating to God like a child, like a teenager, like an adult.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's just stuff I didn't have time to get into.
Yeah. Well, that's great stuff. And if we could, I'd love to talk through a few little academic points of Hosea, but also
bring it, you genius.
just some because Pastor Kevin, we were talking after, or talking last night, and we were just talking how the last few books, they're minor prophets, and they don't get a lot of attention, but the last few books we've talked about have been so relevant to where we are as a culture, society, as a world, and I don't feel like this one's any different. In fact, the last verse of chapter 14 says, the ways of the Lord are right, the righteous walk in them, but the rebellious stumble in them. Mm-hmm. So just a few little cool things about Hosea to point out. He was a Northern Kingdom prophet, which means he spoke primarily to the Northern Kingdom. We believe that he was around for a good long time. I mentioned this earlier, but he's in chapter 1. It says, "The word of the Lord came to Hosea, son of," I say Barry. I don't know if it's Barry.
Barry?
Barry, yeah, Barry. During the reigns of Uzziah, who was a king of the southern kingdom, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and during the reign of Jeroboam, son of Joash, king of Israel. Mm-hmm. So he was a northern kingdom, but they put him in the same context as with the southern kingdom. Uzziah reigned for 50-some years.
Yeah.
And so Hosea would have been around for a long time. So he would have endured, he would have been well known. And we do notice that he spoke some to the southern kingdom at points. We mentioned in chapter 6, he speaks to Judah and says, wait, I'm not going to forget about you guys either, but the northern kingdom is where it lies. And he's also the only northern kingdom prophet to have a written account, which I thought was pretty cool to know. Especially for how long he endured. Just some speculation. We don't know a lot about the prophets. We do know that Ahab and Jezebel killed a lot of prophets. We know that even in the time of Elijah would have been hiding with some of the prophets as well. But for Hosea, just his time, we don't really know a lot about him. We don't know if he was one of the prophets that was killed. I know in Jewish circles, in some of their legends and stuff, that it's believed that he ended up in Babylon and died there, and then his body was buried somewhere else. Mm-hmm. We don't know that for sure. There's really no way. All we really know about Hosea is who his dad was and that he wrote to the northern kingdom, for sure. There are other little stories and speculations. In fact, just of how he references, it's believed he could have been maybe like a little bit of an entrepreneur as a prophet, because a lot of people thought he would have been a baker or a farmer, but because of his role as a prophet and for how long he was around and just for his vast scope of knowledge, it's believed that he wouldn't have been just a baker or just a farmer. He would have owned an operation. So he could have had all the stuff that he lavished on Gomer. He could have been the real deal.
Well, something that I read talked about one of the things that makes it difficult to identify him just being one thing was he didn't use one type of language. A lot of times if they did come from a farming background, the name of his first child was a farming term.
Yep.
Meant to sow or to scatter, but that was it. There was nothing else that kind of led to people to go, oh, everything about him meant that he was from this type of work or from education or from whatever. So it did kind of allude to the fact that it was either hard to pin down what he was, or he was actually a little more entrepreneurial, a little more had dabbled in multiple things.
Yeah.
So it's just points of interest to me that are kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it's kind of cool to mention. And also just the way he kind of structured everything. One of the reasons this is one of my favorite books of the minor prophets we're covering this season of Binge the Bible, just because it kind of prefaces a little bit of the next season that we're going to get into more prophets that have more end time prophecies and insight, and this one's no different. Like if you look at chapter 6, it's kind of the same way. And in fact, we see a return to some of the I guess the word that Pastor Jeff uses is it agrarian, like agricultural based.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So he uses some of those terms, but he gets into he talks about the rains. And I don't know if you guys want to get in that now. I'm always aching to get into kind of a little the underlying story, but
Go ahead.
Oh, by all means.
oh, well, you guys talked me into it. So in chapter 6, it's more of a I see it as it's a little more prophetic because it actually I was actually preparing for this, watching the movie, like I said, but through my normal notes and stuff like that. But I remembered a book that I'd read, and I would recommend this book to anybody. It's a great book, has nothing to do with Bench the Bible, but it's called In the Day of Thy Power. It was written in the 50s by Arthur Wallace. It is a great book. I enjoyed it just because, our church, we've been in the middle of a little bit of a revival. Like God's doing something crazy. And so I was just kind of reading up. I kind of wanted to know a little bit. And I noticed in this book, there's a lot of language through the book of Joel, and even in the New Testament through 1 Corinthians and Hebrews, they kind of throw back to books like Hosea and Joel that mention the former and the latter rains. And we see that mentioned in chapter 6. It says, "Come, let us return to the Lord. He has torn us to pieces, but he will heal us. He has injured us, but he will bind up our wounds. After 2 days, he will revive us. On the third day, he will restore us, that we may live in his presence." And here's where it starts to get interesting if you kind of know what to look for. "Let us acknowledge the Lord. Let us press on to acknowledge him. As surely as the sun rises, he will appear. He will come to us like the winter rains, like the spring rains that water the earth." So he mentions 2 rains, but he talks about them. So studying those terms, kind of what's believed, just to kind of condense a big theological thought, is believed, in agriculture times, the winter rains, they would start around October, they'd last through December, and it would get to be pretty heavy, 2 to 3 days at a time of rain. But if you're a farmer, you like seeing that coming because, like Pastor Jeff has said about Israel and a lot of those lands, it's hard, rocky soil. They depended on this long period of rain to soften up the soil enough to be able to plow the soil. In fact, so much so that even when the rain gets at the heaviest for the winter rains, they have to, whether it's hail, storming, snow, rain, whatever, they still have to go out and plow to get it done. But then we see the spring rains, which would have been the latter rains. Is that right? Latter or former rains. So those rains, what we see is this is when it's the heaviest part of the rains and the storms, and it would happen late spring. And it would last kind of about the same time, but it gets heavier, and it turns everything greener, lusher. It makes it easier to harvest, even though you've got to endure a little more to harvest, but it makes everything ready for the harvest. And what's believed by a lot of scholars, a lot of theologians, a lot of pastors, this is still kind of debated. Is it just a farming term, or does it have merits in end-time prophecy? Personally, I believe it's a little end-time prophecy because it's saying that the first coming of Jesus through the time where he released the Holy Spirit would have been the first rains, where we get ready, the ground's getting plowed and all that, ready to go. But then there's going to come a time when there's a heavier rain, a heavier outpouring of the Holy Spirit. And we even see a little bit of that language at the end of chapter 6, where he does mention Judah. "Also for you, Judah, a harvest is appointed." This term harvest, and I can't remember the Hebrew word for that right off, but it points not just to the agricultural term of the harvest, but to an end-of-the-age type of harvest, which is why we believe this is more of a prophetic part of the book than anything else. I just thought that it's a great point of the story because it's not just here. It's mentioned it's mentioned in this type of language. It's mentioned in Deuteronomy, in Joel, in Jeremiah, and it's always in surrounding that kind of idea. And I just think that's cool that we see it in the middle of a story that's being compared to the body of Israel, a completely human story, 2 people. God's using it to speak to a nation at the time. God is using this overall word to still speak to us today. Be ready. Don't make these same mistakes. We are in the middle of what should be the plowing and the getting ready for the harvest.
Yeah.
Don't make these same mistakes so that you guys can reap the benefits that they didn't. And so in the relevancy of it all, I just think it makes a whole lot of sense.
That's interesting. I think about the verse near the end. I will heal their waywardness and I forgot how to heal their waywardness and how's that passage end? Love them freely, I think is what he says. It even kind alludes to that what is to come, if that makes sense. I love in chapter 6, and this was a point that I almost put in. This would have probably been, actually, I think in the first draft of the message, this was a takeaway. And it's out of chapter 6, verse 6, where he says, "For I desire mercy, not sacrifice, and acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings." And the takeaway was going to be that God's desire is relationship, not ritual. And just talk about how they were still doing the rituals that they were supposed to be doing. Like everything, now they had mixed that with idols, and like there was more than just God that they worshiped. But just talking about that idea, because this book is such a relationally based book, and it just goes in, it kind of conflicts with the two. Like they were so ritualistic, what God wanted was relationship. Yeah. And honestly, sometimes we're not that much different. Yeah. Like we know a lot about it, but even if you know about God, but if you look at the second word there, or that word, I acknowledge, an acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings. I talked about this yesterday, but the acknowledgement is more than just a head knowledge. It's a relational knowledge. Yeah. And what he's saying is, hey, more than just you having all the great worship songs memorized, I want you to know me. Yeah. Right? Like all that stuff's cool. He's not poo-pooing on it. Yeah. But more than that. Yep. Actually know me. Like actually, and I heard Louis Giglio years ago described it this way. He said, it's like when you're walking around and you're dating someone early on and you're always thinking about them and they're always thinking about you and you're always thinking about them and they're thinking about you. He said, what God's desire is that, that like he's always there. We're always thinking about him because he's always thinking about us. Yeah. That there's a constant like connection, a relationship there. And Chris Hodges, a great pastor, he talks about a moment where he was praying. He was in his basement. He was praying and just like doing his normal ritual, his daily devotion, right? And he heard his kids upstairs and they were laughing and running around. And he said in his mind, he was like, man, I just got to finish this up so I can get up there. That sounds so much fun. And he said the Holy Spirit just spoke to him and said, I wish that you loved being with me as much as you love being with them. Wow. Wow. And when I think about this, because it's because I love being with my kids, you know, and it's convicting because what God's saying right here is like, hey, I love all the stuff, but I just love you. Yeah, I just want you to love me. And at the root of it, to me, when you look at Hosea and Gomer, you look at the Son and the Father, you look at all those things in the book, it kind of comes sort of down to that. Yeah, like all the stuff's good. But you just want to be with me. You just connected so many dots to me, too, because, you know, I've always looked at chapter 6 as like a prophetic chapter, but it's also, with what you were saying, how it ends, this book ends with the relational value that God loves, and God is the one that ultimately redeems the story. He redeemed Hosea and Gomer, and how is he redeeming us? I had a note beside, actually, verse 6 from Matthew 9:13. And this is the chapter in the book of Matthew where Jesus is announcing basically who he is. And he even says, like, on hearing this, Jesus said, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. That's great. And it's Jesus redeeming the whole story and connecting the dots from Hosea. I wasn't leaving you hanging then. Yeah. I'm making a way now. It's so good. It's great. That's very good stuff.
Well, and I think we live in a world where it's easy to make programs and, you know, follow rules or not follow rules, but make rules. And that's religion and that's not relationship. And I think that a lot of people look at the church, like, you know, the Big C church, and as a place where you come to be condemned and you come to be, you know, your finger pointed at and shamed and all of that for the things that you did wrong. And that's not what any of it's about. I mean, like, we have to hold each other accountable in love, but we have to lead with grace, and it comes with a relationship with the Lord. And
the relationship is so much harder than just following the rules.
Oh, for sure. And that was actually Chris Hodges too says that too, like the verse in John where he's like, if you love me, you'll do what you'll follow my commands. And a lot of people read it on the other side of the comma, and it's like, you know, like wagging your finger, like, if you love me, you'll do what you'll do what I say. Right. And really it's like, oh, if you love me, you'll do what I say. Right.
All that stuff will take care of itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, I think.
That's a great point. What you just said, say that again.
It's easier to follow the rules than to go after the relationship.
That's so good and
Yep.
so true.
And now, a quick break for today's unofficial sponsor, Second Saturday Serve Day. At Lifepoint Church, we have a value of servanthood. We say that save people, serve people. On the second Saturday of every month, we have a serve day where groups of people from each of our campuses go out into the community to show the love of Christ in tangible ways. We partner with dozens of organizations that offer a multitude of opportunities to get involved. We know that Jesus came to serve and not be served, and we know that as image bearers of Christ, we get to serve as well. To register for our project, visit lifepointnow.com/serve. That's lifepointnow.com/serve. Now, back to the episode.
Well, we actually have a fun little section. This has nothing to do with.
Are we going to read the book out loud? The
Redeeming Love.
Redeeming Love book? Are we about to
Morgan
read?
Freeman
As
kind of
read by
voice.
Caroline.
What did you say?
I said Redeeming Love as read by Caroline.
This is awesome. I'm
We'll
excited
try
about
different
this.
accents and no,
Put some music on behind it. Marvin Gaye.
we will straight up not do that.
Marvin Gaye. I'm 75 years old, evidently.
Listen, Marvin Gaye is timeless. It's fine. Well, we actually we're gonna go to a new section. It's called Biblical Nonsense. It sounds like kind of what it's titled what it sounds like. This isn't gonna have any kind of value to anyone's life. But we have had some people on social media that have submitted different memes, biblical memes, because we are with a church here and we have to make it somewhat holy here. But we've been sent some memes, so we're going to kind of go through them. And there are a few people, or we recognize that some people are watching. This is a video, but also some people are just listening. So it's going to be fun because not only are we going to go through memes, we're also going to describe what the meme looks like. So it's kind of going to be like explaining a meme to your grandma, and they're like, "Who's that?" And the meme,
It's a Mimi.
yeah. I actually have a friend he's my age, and he called them like before they were actually like a big thing, he thought they were called memes, and he kept saying that, and I was like, you literally have to never do that again, because that
Okay,
is.
so speaking of, can we settle something? This is for our audience.
Uh-oh.
Everybody listening, we're about to solve a problem for the world. Is it GIF or GIF?
I am team GIF for sure.
So
GIF is peanut butter.
Well, I know, but like I've said one. It's the only thing I feel insecure about. Is
You're
whenever I say that, I'm like, oh, I sent one of those like pictures that move. That's just what I call it. Like I don't know what to call it.
That is real, because people are firmly on team one or the other.
Yeah.
And that's a real thing.
Well, I just like to say the opposite of what somebody else says, just to see their
you're
response. Because I don't really care one way or the other.
Okay, I like that. I'll just start doing it. I'm going to send a Jiffy.
No, it's never Jiffy. It's never.
It is from now on. It just became that.
Well, because I think
Now
it's
we know what
GIF
Camp
because
Caroline's
it's
in.
like the word gift. You just take the T off of it. Gift.
I don't have enough mental capacity to think that much about it. I just like somebody to tell me.
You brought it up.
I know. I just want to
clearly have
know.
Thought about it a
You've
lot.
thought about it a lot. You have much more mental capacity than I do.
Yeah.
You're a social media genius. You're a Bible
I don't know.
genius.
I'm
just over here.
If I had a dog in the fight, I'd prefer GIF.
Yeah.
Because we live in the South, and if somebody says gift or GIF, I'm always going to think they're saying gift.
Well, that is true. You got to take the Southern accent into.
We don't finish words
Yeah.
in the South.
Yeah. That's
See?
real.
So I did.
I like
Wait a
it.
minute. I didn't even notice. Did you actually do
See?
that?
See, nobody knows it. We live in the South.
We
and
live in
nobody-
the South.
North Carolina. Okay, so let's see. Okay, we did this last time. Oh, never mind. That was the one that I picked last time. Who are these people again? What are they called?
Skeletor.
Yeah.
What is
From
wrong?
He-Man.
I did this last time too, and I didn't.
We
know them.
describe this one.
Maybe.
you don't know.
Well, I did. I picked this one in our last episode, but there's multiple in this little carousel of.
So He-Man is one of the greatest cartoons of all time.
The greatest.
And-
Do you know the quote from his transition to He-Man?
Transition to.
Oh, I have the power?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
By the
By
power
the
of Grayskull.
power of Grayskull, I have the power.
How are we doing this again?
It's wonderful, yeah.
Just like,
I had the sword and everything when I was a kid.
oof.
Yeah.
That's.
In my mind, that was going to make me muscular. Still waiting on it.
That's the whole reason I would carry a sword on my back, because He-Man did.
You care. where? Where did you carry a sword on your back?
Not a real sword, Caroline. I was like 10. It was a toy sword. No. Actually, even if it wasn't a toy, it was like screwdrivers. It was whatever I could find. If it was, it just went straight down my shirt because I was going to be He-Man.
That's awesome.
Oh, wow.
Well, this meme particularly is Skeletor, who was He-Man's arch rival, arch nemesis, and Evil Lynn, who is kind of the
She looks
female
like from Emperor's New Groove, except for young.
I don't even know what that means, but
See, that I know.
she's Evil Lynn. She's kind of the female on the bad side, right? That would be the best way to say
I
it.
think it's a band, too, Evil Lynn. I think they're a punk band.
It's awesome. So anyway, I'll let you continue. So they're standing side by side. Skeletor's kind of giving her the, like, talk to the hand.
Yeah.
Go.
No, I did this one last episode.
Why are we talking about it again?
Well, because there's multiple in this one, but I don't know this. I don't know these people, and what is he holding? He's holding a dog.
Yeah, I don't know that one. Let's go to the next one.
All right, let's see. What are these guys?
So that is Skeletor and one of the other bad guys. He was like Merman. That was his name.
Oh, I know Merman from SpongeBob.
He talked like he was gargling something.
He was a different merman.
What is it? Barnacle Boy? Merman? No. What was his name? Somebody drop that in a comment for me, will you? And tag me in it. Barnacle Boy and somebody from SpongeBob.
SpongeBob and He-Man don't belong in the same conversation.
They seem like virtually interchangeable, honestly. Okay, well, I'm gonna go to here. This is one that you should probably appreciate. It's your boy.
It's Chris Pratt.
Yeah, and he's saying, who is this guy? What's this guy's name? Tell me this guy's name. We'll throw it on the screen if you're watching. If not, you're welcome. This is not helpful.
This is a Parks and Rec.
He's in Parks and Rec, and he's the
He married Leslie on Parks and Rec.
Yeah. What was his name in the show though? I can't remember. Anyway.
Ben Wyatt.
Yeah, thank you. And so it says Adam to everyone he meets, everyone new he meets in heaven, and he says, "Let me just say from the bottom of my heart, my bad."
My bad.
You know that everybody walking in heaven's like, really, dude?
Thanks.
Like,
Thanks, buddy.
yeah, appreciate all that. Especially the women in childbirth are probably like, yeah. Thanks, Adam and Eve. You guys are awesome.
You have to even
This
talk
other one, this lady smiling, this basically just feels like a dad joke to me.
Yeah, it is.
Is that? Who wants to tell this one?
I think you have to because
Okay.
I sure don't want to.
So it's some lady who's laughing, but here's the dad joke. This is dad joke of the day right here. Where did Noah keep his bees?
Ugh.
In the ark hives.
Oh. That is not.
Oh, that's just
That's the level of humor. I love it.
terrible.
What?
Oh, here's another one. This is in the comments of this. Someone else put another dad joke about Noah. Why could they not play cards on the ark?
Oh, jeez, why?
Because Noah was sitting on the deck. The deck of the ship.
No, yeah, no, I
Yeah,
get
okay.
it.
Just making sure you understood.
I was looking through, and this is on Epic Christian Memes, and so I'm scrolling through. It's again He-Man. I guess Skeletor is a great guy to have in memes.
He got saved.
So
near the end.
I'm flipping through. Yeah, he got saved. He got redeemed.
He got saved near the end of his time.
And I'm flipping through, and these are all Christian. And then I get to this one, and he's like pouting in a corner with his hands up, and it says, "When I take a dump and forget my phone."
Oh, Skeletor! Yes,
What a
that's great.
wow.
That
So-
is great.
This one's one of my favorite ones. It's not on the ones that got sent to us. I just found it on my own. It's all of the different, not spokespeople. What are they called? Like Ronald McDonald, Wendy from Wendy's.
Mascots?
Yeah, mascots.
Oh yeah, from like fast food joints.
Yeah, and like the Colonel from KFC. They're all like sitting at a
see what you're
table
saying.
with their hands raised, like they're praying. Which like is totally, if you don't follow, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it's like crazy Christian Aunt or something is the Instagram, and it's always like the most ridiculous things and the things that you're like, man, that is, I really do have an aunt. One time, actually, side note, I had an aunt. Hopefully she's not listening to this. I won't name her. I have 3. And she posted a picture, and that was like, you know, one of those, if you really love Jesus, you'll share this photo, or like you'll share your vacation photo, but you're too scared to share this photo of Jesus or whatever. And it was Anakin Skywalker from Star Wars. And she wasn't trying to be funny. It was real. Anyway, I screenshot it and never told her for sure.
Oh, man.
I'm nice. Anyway, this is as me and the boys praying that God will turn diabetes into blessings. And that is so real because they're all sitting there around their hamburgers and French fries praying.
I feel like the appropriate reading for that, though, is diabetes.
Diabetes.
Not diabetes.
Here will be my final submission.
Okay.
This is a meme of Jesus standing next to, looks like a young man who is sad. He's kind of got his face in his hand. And it says, Jesus, this is Jesus telling you that it's creepy to tell the girls that God said you'd be married to them. For every guy who is listening, who is single.
Don't do that.
Yeah, that is not a winner. So I would just say...
Start a new segment called dating submissions from real life dating apps. I got some good ones.
That is not...
creepy.
There's also one here. I said that would be my last one. This one's good. This is a picture of Jesus again, looking kind of distressed, sad, disappointed. And it says, Jesus watching you drop an ice cube and then kick it under the fridge. I love it. I love it.
Oh, it's
Especially when you can't pick it up because they're too slippery.
They're too slippery.
Yeah. I don't get my hands all wet and you got to dry your hands. No, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. These are great. What is this? What is this again?
Biblical.
Epic Christian memes.
Oh, yeah.
Great.
You should. Crazy Christian Ant's another good one, I'm telling you.
This is awesome.
So
I'm
for
going to
everybody
order
listening.
This rug. Sorry, this rug is for when you're hosting a small group, and the rug says "Live, Laugh, Leave." Perfect.
I actually have that rug.
Perfect.
It says, please leave by 9. I don't, but I should.
I'm sorry, Pastor Jason. I
I
interrupted.
was going to say, for anybody listening, this is some of the stuff you can send us. Share your memes.
Oh yeah, please.
And your interpretation. We'll take that too.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking. I think you and I were talking about this last night too. Like speaking of like sending and all this stuff, like with Binge the Bible. So our church, you mentioned that we're at a church in Wilmington, North Carolina. For those of you who are listening, who are not a part of us, we've been in this series for over a year, right? And so it kind of comes and goes in seasons. We kind of it's akin to like a Netflix season where we drop a lot all at once. But there's a lot of people who have not been a part of previous seasons. And practically, so our church, since we've started this series, has grown exponentially. You kind of said it, we've been in a bit of a revival. So we were doing some quick math last night, just on a guess, from the time we started the series, with people who may have moved out of town or not a part of our church anymore, plus the growth that we've seen. I mean, you're talking anywhere from 700 to 900-ish people who were not around for season 1. So all that to say, if you're new to us, if you're just joining us, if you're new to the Bible and you're thinking, what happened in the very beginning of it all, we have a website set up. It's bingethebible.org. And it has all of our past episodes of this podcast, along with the messages that happen on the weekend that accompany those. And so you can watch, you can listen to all of those. We have reading plans for all of them. You can almost kind of start Binge the Bible at your own pace. There have been some people that I've talked to who have done that, and they've just kind of gone straight through and gotten to where we are. So it's a good resource for you guys, especially who are new. As you're engaging with the podcast, engaging with the series, make sure you're just kind of like engaging with everything that was done in the past as well.
Yeah. No, that's super helpful. I like those reading plans too, because it really does help. Like after you listen to the message, while you're waiting anxiously for the podcast to drop,
Right.
you can spend some time actually reading the Bible. It's great. But a lot of people, that's it. A lot of people have said it's made it a lot more accessible. Feeling at least, that sometimes it can be daunting if you're a new Christian, or if you're, even if you've been a Christian for a while and you just have a lot of questions of like where to start and all that. Yeah. It's been a lot. We've gotten a lot of feedback, at least, that it's been super helpful for people to know where to start and how to start doing that. So
that's a good word. Yeah. Awesome. What's next, Caroline?
Well, normally this is where we end out on our podcast is Cringe the Bible.
Well, don't forget about the doggy bag.
The doggy
I
bag.
feel like you just don't like to say that term.
I don't. I actually wasn't part of whatever meeting the doggy bag came out of, and I just have a motion to strike the name.
What are you taking home?
I just hate it.
Because you don't want to say leftovers. 'Cause that has a
Takeaways?
bad I'm just taking the leftovers from church. Going home with my leftovers.
That I'll never eat, and that'll go and die in my refrigerator. Not the kind of leftovers. Okay, well, the one takeaway that's inspired us, how about that?
Great.
That's not really a name. I just don't want to say doggy bag.
AKA the doggy bag.
Ew.
Welcome to this section, the doggy bag.
Why are you saying it in a radio voice?
Sponsored by Alpo Foods.
Gross. Yeah, I mean, okay, anyway. The point of the doggy bag, I said it, is really just to talk about, something that's a takeaway. I think, Pastor Kevin, for me at least, you mentioned, how it kind of humanizes the story in the beginning of Hosea and Gomer. Like, it humanizes the characters and also the themes for how sin can separate us and we can separate ourselves. I think I spent a lot of time, have spent a lot of time whenever preparing for this and reading Hosea in the past, thinking about what Gomer's experience would be like and like the kind of shame that would cause her to run. Because I mean, they were married at least long enough to have 3 kids. So that's, a handful of years. And so it's not like she hadn't experienced what was, she said later, like the things that were better for me than what I found off on my own. And so it reminds me that like shame is such a veil that is so blinding to everything else. Like it's something that's it keeps us wrapped up so much in that and can separate us from the love of God because that's all we can see is our own shortcomings. Because she knew the past that, she came from. She knew the kind of woman that she was known for. And like, I think that's all I can think about is like that she kept going, like she kept reminding herself of that, even though like I have this life with these children and this husband that loves me and is faithful to me and the Lord. Like the only thing in my mind that could cause her to run would be her own shame and her own, just that cycle of sin that just keeps her in bondage. And I just have my heart just breaks for her so much in that because that's got to be so hard. And I think that, a lot of people can turn to so many different things that are, because they're broken, that are, feel like an unredeemable sin to be able to escape from. But then the picture of the Lord just loving her regardless, like obviously, in the story through Hosea, but like loving her regardless of what she's done and who she is and has been, and still seeing the potential in that. It's like, we need people in our lives, whether it's a spouse or friends or whoever, to be able to remind us of like, you're more than your shame. And you're more than the things that you've done. You're more the things that you're continuing to do. Like you have a plan and a purpose, and there is hope. There's always hope because it's gonna be something that you can point to the fact that the Lord has been there with you through the whole thing. Yeah. So that for me is the big takeaway of like.
Why I like that what you said so much is, and Pastor Kevin mentioned it earlier. Whenever he went back to buy her back, it said that the Lord said, "Go show your love to your wife again." Yeah. And then he goes on to say at the bottom, then he told her, "You are to live with me many days. You must not be a prostitute or be intimate with any man, and I will behave the same toward you." Yeah. So he was making a renewed vow.
He gives her respect.
Yeah.
The Lord told Hosea to go twice there. Mm-hmm. Go take your wife and go take your wife back. Yep. And I think about with her, and I think it's what a lot of people, what happens when you get kind of wrapped up in sin. One of my takeaways, and I'll say this and then I'll go back to what you were just saying. It's Hosea 7:2, their sins engulf them and they're always before them. I feel like that's what happened to her, is that, with sin, we either get stuck in sin or we get shamed because of sin. And I think with her, she went from having affairs to being a prostitute. Like something happened where she was too far gone. Like something, like I don't think people just go, "Hey, I think when I grow up, I want to be a prostitute," right? Yeah. She just kind of like somehow stumbles into that, and she's stuck. Or shame keeps us stuck. And I think to your point, and him saying that, like when I read that, what you just read, Pastor Jason, I read it, the first time I read that, I read it with Hosea going, "Now you listen here. You are going to live with me. You're not going to be a prostitute. You're not going to be intimate with any man." But it's the last phrase of that sentence that changed it for me. Yep. That it's him speaking new life into her. Yeah. Hey, you're actually coming home. You're not stuck anymore. You're not shamed anymore. Like it's so redemptive in the way that, and without her ever promising to do any of that stuff, he says, "I'm going to behave the same way towards you." And I think that's what our Father in heaven does for us, is what Jesus does, is when you're stuck, when you're in shame, you're honestly, Hosea says it at the end of the book, like you're one honest confession away.
Yeah.
From him healing their waywardness. Like it's like he will heal you of your sickness and of your sin. It's just bringing what's in the dark out into the light. And if you're listening to this, somehow you stumbled on it and you are far from, you feel stuck, you feel ashamed. It might even be something you've been forgiven from, but it still lives in the dark for you. And every time a thought comes up or whatever, shame recaptures you, or it maybe pulls you back into something. We just want to say to you, you are not stuck in Jesus' name, and you do not have to live in shame in Jesus' name. Like God says to you the words that Hosea said to Gomer, like, I will behave in grace towards you. Like, I will not shame you. You are not stuck. His desire is to rescue you out of that moment, out of that season. And I would just say to this, you're one honest confession away. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just like tell him, like use your words, articulate it, articulate what makes you feel stuck, articulate your shame and tell him. And then go to a trusted person and tell them. Because a lot of times we tell the Lord things, but we don't tell people. Mm-hmm. And don't air it on social media, but go to like a trusted person or people and bring that thing from the darkness into the light, and the light will help heal it. Yeah. But that's what keeps us stuck. Like, and you know, it's true. Like we confess to God and we're forgiven. We confess to people and we're free.
Yeah,
and so
good.
Don't be stuck in that. So I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's a great takeaway, Caroline.
Yeah.
Thank you for not saying doggy bag.
Yeah, well, my doggy bag.
There it is.
I mean, it's kind of similar, and it's just the imagery, because what you're saying, Pastor Kevin, about I feel like everybody gets to that mode where they feel stuck. Some way more so than others, especially those that just they can't muster up the language, and they don't really, maybe they don't even know how. But I love how God puts it in perspective for us in chapter 2, verse 14. Is the Lord saying what He's going to do for Israel, and He says, "Therefore, I'm going to allure her. I will lead her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her. There I will give her back her vineyards and will make the valley of Acre a door of hope." Acre means trouble. Mm-hmm. So whatever that trouble is, God can redeem it, and He can make it that door of hope that you just step through into what He's got waiting.
That my doggy bag is the same thing. It's that last part. And probably of all the things in the sermon that I felt most prompted by the Lord to just like shine a light on, it was that verse. Because I feel like when people are walking through what anyone who's walking through this, like they feel stuck, they feel shame, they feel their marriage is hanging on by a thread because maybe they've been betrayed by someone who had an affair, or someone who's looking at pornography, or maybe they're the one who like doesn't want to. I was having a conversation not long ago with someone. It was basically like, I don't want to do that. Yeah. But there's undiscipline in their life that opens the door for that, right? But they don't want to be stuck there. But if you will walk together through that valley, I mean, the Bible says that God will provide a door of hope. Yeah. And the three of us, like we've walked through seasons where the only thing to do was just take the next right step. Yeah. We don't see a door of hope. We don't feel like there's one coming. It might be a year from now, a week from now, who knows? But consistently just staying in step with Jesus in that valley, the Lord will provide that. Mm-hmm. He will provide it somehow. Probably look different than we thought, but He'll provide it.
Almost definitely will. I feel like that's the thing, is it always does. But yeah, that's good. So glad for the doggy bag section.
Doggy bag.
Really helpful.
I don't want to shake a bag. Doggy bag.
I just don't know that anybody actually calls it a doggy bag.
If you like this section, would you
share,
send us a message? Yeah. Hashtag doggy bag for Caroline.
I'm pretty sure there's an emoji for that.
It's got Skeletor on it.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's another one. We binged it. We did it. Man,
Good
season
job.
4 is we're just cruising through. I'm just telling you. We got a couple episodes left, but
such good stuff.
Good job.
It's been awesome.
Good job.
Hosea and Gomer.
SHAZAM.
And on that note, see y'all next time.